This is more emblematic of the crisis of policing than even when unarmed people die, because for every George Floyd that gets killed unarmed, there are dozens and hundreds of people with mental illness that are forced to be criminalized and have these types of engagements with law enforcement every single day.
On Monday, Philadelphia police shot and killed Walter Wallace Jr., a black man who was having a mental health episode, and according to his family, he was manic bipolar. Now, I'm going to show you a couple clips here. One's going to be the NBC affiliate discussing the story, and another is going to be Mark Lamont Hill discussing why this keeps happening and what needs to happen. But let me first just give you, some of the facts here. He was wielding a knife in front of cops. He was about 10 feet away, and they shot him. No attempt here to de-escalate the situation. The cops were called 3 times to the house on Monday. They had already known that he was having a mental health episode. His family called for an ambulance, called for mental help. Instead, they send the cops, and the cops shoot and kill him. And in fact, police had received 31 radio calls since May concerning his address. He was known to police because of these mental health episodes. Just read a little bit more here before I get to the first clip. Police said Walter Wallace Jr., 27, was wielding a knife and ignored orders to drop the weapon before the officers fired shots Monday afternoon. But his parents said Tuesday night that officers knew their son was in a mental health crisis because they had been to the family's house 3 times on Monday. Kathy Wallace, his mother, said one of the times they stood there and laughed at us. So a lot to discuss here, but first let me show you the NBC News affiliate report on this.
Those family members tell me that they told police that Walter Wallace Jr. suffered from mental health issues. They say he was taking medication. I did speak to 2 of his cousins today who tell me that his parents are trying to come to grips with what they witnessed.
They're never going to be the same again. They actually sat and watched their son literally get murdered, and it's crazy.
Family members like cousin Anthony Fitzhugh have seen the video that shows 2 Philadelphia police officers shooting and killing 27-year-old Walter Wallace Jr. outside of his mother's row home near 61st and Locust Streets. Wallace Jr. was a husband and father.
These are all school-age children, so now his children have to grow up knowing that the police officers killed my father.
He come from somebody, he belonged to somebody, he came from good parents.
Other family members like cousin Sam White are questioning why police had to kill him.
Police officers are trained to diffuse and de-escalate situations, or they should be trained to diffuse and de-escalate situations. There could have been something else done before you take a person's life.
According to initial reports, Wallace Jr. had a knife and officers asked him to drop it. The family tells me Wallace Jr. suffered from mental health issues and was having a breakdown when police responded.
I don't know if they had tasers on them, but if tasers were an option, let that be your first option.
Every police officer is not issued a taser.
Today, Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw revealed the officers in the video were not equipped with tasers. As for the family, Fitzhugh wants answers.
Is one target and both of you officers are shooting like you're in a war or something.
We hear stories like this way too often. And by the way, it's not just the U.S. In Canada as well, there is a serious issue with police shooting mentally ill individuals. Over the summer, I covered this story, a man named Ijaz Chowdhury, an elderly man. He was having a mental health episode in his home, the 2nd floor of an apartment. What the police did, his family called, so the man was home alone, his family called for some mental help. The police show up, bring a ladder, climb up to his 2nd floor balcony, break in his door, and shoot him dead because he's holding a knife. When you're breaking into an elderly man's home who's having a mental episode, what do you expect? He's going to sit there and welcome you in? But this kind of shit happens all the time. This is not even necessarily an issue with those individual cops that did this here. The issue is, why are the cops showing up to a mental health episode when you have people who are armed, who all they have is a gun, and they're trained to shoot and kill? Why would you send those people to help in a situation where somebody's having a mental health crisis? This is a rot in the system. And for whatever reason, there is an unwillingness to change it, despite the fact that so many people are getting killed because of it. Now, let me show you some stats, some data here. This is from berkeley.edu. The widely reported deaths of Michael Brown and Philando Castile reflect a grim truth in this country. According to data collected by the Washington Post, around 1,000 people are shot and killed by the police in the U.S. each year, and black men are more than twice as likely to be victims as white men. These inequalities become even more stark for older and mentally ill unarmed black men, finds a new analysis which appeared online last month in the Journal of Annals of Epidemiology. While young men still bear the brunt of police killings, the study found that police are 5 times more likely to shoot and kill unarmed black men over age 54 than unarmed white men the same age. Police are also more likely to shoot and kill unarmed black men who exhibit signs of mental illness compared to white men with similar behaviors. So while there is an issue in general with how the police treat those who are experiencing mental health episodes, within that, there is still that obvious discrimination where black men are treated worse than white men that are having mental episodes. Now, I got another clip to show you, but before I get there, I got to share this. I saw this online. I think this is a real person. You know, when it comes to Twitter, you always got a question, but this guy has like 40,000 followers. Appears to be a real person. But he tweets out here, "I'm black, I'm a cop. I've also had hours of de-escalation training. With that said, no matter your color, mental status, prior condition, or mood, if you run at me with a knife, I will shoot you. Many times, the end." This is the problem. Like, he's posting this like, they weren't being racist because I would also shoot anybody that comes at me with a knife. That's the problem. Your job as an officer is not to murder people. It is to de-escalate situations. Somebody who is having a mental health episode, regardless of if they have a knife or not, that person, your job as an officer is to de-escalate. You should expect, as a police officer, that you're going to be in positions where you're putting yourself in danger. That's part of the job. The job is not to ensure that you are safe at all times. The job is to put yourself in danger to help others. If you don't want that a part of your job, then don't be a cop. But that is part of your job. So to just expect or to just assume that it's perfectly fine to shoot and kill anybody who just a little bit threatens your life, possibly, that is insane. That is a rot in this system. That is a problem. Police should not be showing up to these mental health episodes. If this is the position that they have, then why are the police showing up to these situations? And this is when we get to Mark Lamont Hill. So he was on Democracy Now! And discussed what needs to be done.
For decades, what we've seen is a sort of raid of the social resources. We no longer have access to mental health, schooling, housing, education. All these things are taken out of the public good and replaced by more militarization, replaced by more policing. And so the police become the response to all of our social problems and crises. The police aren't equipped to do this. The police aren't equipped to handle a situation for mental health. And we've seen this since the 1970s, when beginning with Reagan and into President Carter's, beginning with President Carter's administration and entering Reagan's administration, we've seen the stripping of mental health resources. And so we see the criminalization of mental health as mentally ill people end up on the street and then get locked up for loitering. We see the killing of people with mental illness when they have confrontations with police. And in many ways, Juan and Amy, this is more emblematic of the crisis of policing than even when unarmed people die. Because for every George Floyd that gets killed unarmed, there are dozens and hundreds of people with mental illness that are forced to be criminalized and have these types of engagements with law enforcement every single day.
This, of course, is exactly right. Mental illness is criminalized. When you cut budgets, when you cut healthcare, cut education, cut public services, yet continue to pour money into policing, militarize your police force, what do you expect is going to happen? If you're a police department, by the way, this is also a pro-cop argument. Because if you have 10 different responsibilities, you can't possibly expect anybody to be that competent at 10 different things as opposed to if they only had 1 or 2 responsibilities. The cops should be defunded because their role should be to respond to violent crime. They should not be showing up to mental health calls. You can't expect somebody whose job is to carry a gun around you can't expect those people to know how to de-escalate a mental health situation. There are people that are their entire lives, their education is in dealing with people with mental health issues, with mental episodes. Those are the people that should be showing up to these situations, not cops that are armed with guns. This should be obvious, yet we keep having this discussion. Nothing is ever going to change if we just continually acknowledge or recognize what the problem is, yet do nothing about it. This will continue happening. There has to be an actual different approach taken to policing. And it begins with defunding police, meaning putting a lot of those resources into other areas like public health and taking those responsibilities, certain responsibilities, away from the cops so that the cops can focus on a particular area of violent crime and not cause the violence themselves.